On this episode, we talk to Dax Ward about his photographs of abandoned places in Bangkok.
So if you're a fan of Bangkok's many crumbling and abandoned architectural gems, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, this be the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 because I was a hard man who wanted to learn how to be humble.
Ooh, I love the reference.
Yeah.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 21 years ago, fell in love with trying to say the Thai word for 11 and having it not be misunderstood for 18. So I never left. I'm still struggling with that, man.
Small victories, right? So you're saying that like when you say sip-et, which is 11, people mistake it for sip-bat, which is 18.
That's right. Now, it obviously doesn't happen all the time, but I remember in October of 2000 having a conversation with my buddy about sip-et and sip-bat and how, sometimes, because I lived on Sukhumvit, and I wanted to go to Soy 11 because that's where all the bars were.
Yeah.
And then they would take me to 8. They would take me to 18. Right. So that was October of 2000. And it just happened to me again, like last week, where I wanted to go to Soy 11 somewhere and they took me to 18. And it doesn't happen all the time, but it's pretty shocking.
It's so funny because the same thing happened to me today. I picked up my son from school and I said Jorgensen, which is the road that I've lived on for 10 years. And the taxi driver's like, I said Jorgensen. And he's like, okay, tong pai la, leo kwa, leo sai. Like he knew that I wanted to go straight, but he didn't get Jorgensen. I'm like, I've been saying it for 10 years. Am I not? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. But whatever, we're not going to go on a Thai rant, but we have to blame ourselves. We must blame ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, emails with behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, access to our Discord server to chat with me, which I've actually participated in recently.
Yeah.
Greg and other listeners around the world, and various other goodies. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about the weird world of ASMR videos, the upcoming Bangkok fetish ball, and Thailand's relationship with sex toys, as well as my experience joining my local neighborhood gym. To learn how to become a patron, click the support link at the top of our website. And before we continue on, I want to give a special shout out to our patron, Inna from Ukraine. Thank you, Inna, for chatting with me about your situation. All of our thoughts and prayers are with you and your friends and family.
Yeah, it's great that she's able to still chat with us and let us know what's going on the ground. So we hope things get better over there. That's all you can say about that, really. Yeah,
for sure.
Right. If you do happen to manage to head to our website and you have something to say or a show idea or a joke or just want to say hi, head to the little microphone button at the bottom right of the website to leave us a voicemail that we'll play on the show. All right. Well, this episode, hey, check this out, Ed. This is another episode suggested by our friend Zach. This is like the third episode he suggested for us.
Damn.
And he needs to get a bumper sticker or a t-shirt or something like that. But on this episode, we chat with a very cool guy by the name of Dax Ward. Now, you may not know his name, but you may very well have seen his photos. Dax is a photographer who is mostly known for his beautiful photos of abandoned places from Chernobyl to South Africa. But seeing as he's based in Bangkok, he has a ton of great material taken right here at home. Now, Dax has traveled all over the country taking photos of giant factories, forgotten mansions, deserted clubs, and dilapidated movie theaters, all of them abandoned and left to be reclaimed by nature. Now, not only is taking great photos an art in and of itself, but researching, finding, and getting into one of Bangkok's many abandoned locations is also somewhat of a skill. It's probably best left to daredevils like Dax. So to discuss his work and Bangkok's forgotten corners, here is my discussion with photographer Dax Ward. All right. Well, we are talking today with someone that I think is going to be a really interesting conversation because, as we know, Bangkok is a very crazy city and a lot of people love it for a lot of different reasons. But our guest today is a photographer who takes some really, really interesting photos of some interesting pieces of Bangkok and sort of presents the city in a whole new light. Dax Ward, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and glad to be able to talk about some of the pictures I've taken and places I've seen.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
It's cool because I think one of our buddies, Zach, he recommended that you come on the show, and I'd seen your photos before, and I thought that it might be fun to chat because your photos are, I don't know. I mean, I'm a dunce when it comes to photography. I know nothing about it. I have a phone, and I think I bought a DSLR camera about 10 years ago, and that's it. That's my photography experience. So you take some really interesting photos of some really interesting and creepy places. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, like what's going on and what do you do to bring them to life and how do you find it and what's it like exploring the sort of darker, unseen side of Bangkok with a camera in your hand. But first, how did you get started and where are you from and what's going on?
That's a good question. I kind of got into it by accident, I guess. And around 2016, well, back up a little bit before that. And I didn't even know how to use a DSLR or to process photos or anything until around 2015 when I started learning. I joined the Bangkok Photographers Group, and Denny Cody is kind of the boss of that group, and he's been my mentor and taught me pretty much everything I've known and everything I've learned. And I, just started still fairly recently with photography in general, but somewhere around 2016, I just for fun, just out of interest, I went with my wife Mok to the airplane graveyard, which is down Ratchada somewhere, I think, or Ramkhamhaeng.
Ramkhamhaeng, sort of upper Ramkhamhaeng.
And I went there and took photos and looked around and, I processed them as usual. And I put them up on a website, photo sharing website. It wasn't Flickr. It was another one, 500px, I think.
Okay.
And, without just to share them as people do on social media. And a few months later, a syndicator from the UK contacted me and asked if they could make a story out of it. And I was like, okay, well, I've never done this before. I don't really know much about it. Sure, why not? So they sent me a few questions to ask about the place, and I answered the questions and sent them back. And they sent me a message that said, the story's up for sale. And I was like, okay, great. And
so this is a syndicator. So how does that work?
They work with photographers and journalists all over the world, and they basically put stories together and put them up for sale on their website, and publications buy them. Often the ones I've been working with, at least, are usually tabloids, like UK-based tabloids.
Oh, okay, so they comb the internet for interesting things, assemble them in a story format and sell it.
Try to find something that's kind of clickbaitish, I guess, and put it together as a story. But they put it up, and I didn't really think much about that because once again, I didn't really know what I was into. But I just did a search a couple of days later, and I saw it had been kind of gone viral. It was picked up by the Daily Mail and the Weather Channel and a few others.
I remember that. So you were the guy that started that.
I guess so. Yeah, it got pretty popular after that. I've noticed a lot of people still go there. But that's kind of where it got started. So it got the wheels turning, and so I started thinking of other places that I know around the city and around Thailand that I've seen that I'd really like to go see and take pictures of and try to do the same thing again because it's something to do. It's fun. It's interesting. So I kind of went from there and built up from there. And I think I went to the next was like some abandoned mansions in Nakhon Pathom or something, and then the Batman nightclub in Pattaya, and there's been about 50 something places, I guess, since then that I've documented.
Interesting.
But that's how I got into it. I just want to, I think what draws a lot of us to, urban exploration genre and the interest in exploring abandoned places is just wondering some basic questions like, number one, what did this place used to be? What was its value to the local community? Number two, like, how did this happen? How did it become abandoned? What's the story? And also, what's happened here? Has anything weird or crazy or strange or funny or scary happened here?
Man, are you in the right city?
Exactly. Like every place, no matter how innocuous it seems that every place has some kind of a story to tell, especially abandoned places that have been around, especially ones that have been around for decades, like a lot of the, Tom Yum Goong victims, I guess.
It's the financial crisis.
Yeah, that's, a lot of the places can be traced back to that, financial crisis. The bottom fell out and a lot of construction companies lost everything and just had to stop mid-construction or toward the end. And but, at the same time, a lot of them have their own stories and their own reasons for being abandoned that don't really even relate to that.
Right.
Which is also interesting in its own right, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually thought about doing a show about this, about places that we loved that are no more. And I just haven't done a lot of thinking about it, but I could probably come up with 4 or 5 places. But it does seem to be a trend in Bangkok when something is big or it opens with a big splash, and then a few months later or a few years later, if they're lucky, it's just gone.
There's so many places, like that, like you mentioned, though, that they have these big plans and it's a huge expenditure of funds to build these places and to get them, to promote them and to get them open. And then suddenly, after just a couple of years, they get, they shut down. It's almost like there was no market research done or,
right. Well, like I remember years ago, I used to live on Petbury Road and down Soi Sunwichai. There was a big, where it met Ramkhamhaeng Road. They opened a big club. I forget what it was called. The Nana X Club or something like that. And it was a big building. And I'm like, you're on Ramkhamhaeng Road. There's no pedestrian traffic here. It's hard to get in. There's traffic jams all over the place. And sure enough, within a year, it was just like this abandoned hulk of a building. I didn't really get it. There's a Ministry of Sound on Soi 12, which closed. Although they didn't abandon it, they turned it into something else. Right. But there's so many places that rise up with a lot of fanfare and then just get left behind.
It happens, really often. And one of the places that I took pictures at not too long ago, I think it was back in December, is a polo club just outside of Bangkok on the way to Pattaya. And it's, from what I've gathered, it opened in the early 90s and closed in the mid to late 90s. So it was only open for a few years, but it's an enormous place with not just the polo club itself. It had an outdoor and an indoor field, and a bunch of stables on multiple floors. But there's also this really ornate mansion area behind it, which was like a hotel / like clubhouse for the members, I guess.
Oh, wow.
And that was the most interesting point. It looked like something like Salvador Dali and MC Escher worked together, to design it. It was just a trip, right? Like all these stairs to nowhere and, this giant clock fountain on the ground that looked like it was melted or something. It was just totally bizarre. But yeah, they had to have spent so much money, millions and millions of dollar amounts rather than just bought. And to only be open for a few years, it had to be such a loss.
No kidding.
It's a beautiful place, but the problem is, there's a pretty famous, I guess, polo club in Bangkok, and then there's maybe an even more famous one in Pattaya, I think, where Prince William played back in the 2000s or something. Yeah. So, Thailand's not necessarily a big equestrian country. Only the very wealthy can afford horses and to keep them in stables and to pay for membership at a polo club. So it might not have been that much, clientele that could have supported a place like that.
You think a place like that is like a vanity project, like I'm going to put my name to the best, fill in the blank property, and it turns out to be a bit harder than they think it would be. Yeah,
it happens a lot. It happens, in not just businesses, but houses and housing estates. And there's a lot of, those that are abandoned around the country in different places, Bangkok and elsewhere. But it's always interesting to find the backstory if you can find one.
I always wonder in movies, you see like our command center's in this building and they're in this massive empty loft or something. I'm like, who leaves a loft like that undeveloped? But I'm like, maybe they're in Bangkok. There's lots of them around.
Could be.
So when you approach a place, like when you hear about a place, what's your process for going and getting some of these photos that you get?
I'll look it up on Google Streets, if it's in the city or if it's somewhere that Google Maps people have gone with the car.
Yeah.
I can go to Street View and just take a look around and kind of get an idea of how it's set up. Try to find out from the people, whoever told me about it, if there's a security guard or squatters or someone there that I can go and chat with and kind of get permission to go in. And then, just head over there. A lot of times I just go blind without knowing what's going to be there. And
really?
I usually go by myself. Sometimes my wife goes with me, but she's not super into it anymore. Unless we go with some of her friends and do kind of a fashion or a model shoot or something, which is not that often, but usually it's by myself, and I'll just go and, look around. If there's, if it's totally open and it's out in the middle of nowhere, in the city's outskirts, especially places like that, and there's no walls or fences or signs saying no trespassing, and I'll go in and just, take photos for an hour, hour and a half hour. If there's, security guards there, I'll go straight to them and try to work out something. And, the closer you get to the city center, the more difficult it is to get into places for obvious reasons. There's more people, there's more squatters and, homeless types that want to kind of go and have a place to live, which is understandable. And, tourists and other city folk that try to get into these places. So it's more difficult to get permission in the city than it is a bit on the outskirts. And so, oftentimes, when I get to places that are a bit more open, the security guards are really cool, and I, pay them a little money, not a couple hundred baht, and for that I get a tour or get some, some interesting details, some information about when it opened and when it closed, and what it used to be and why it closed, and if anything interesting happened there. So, security guys and squatters and such are often really good sources of information. But if I get a no, or if they just, if I can't work out a deal, if they just keep saying no, then I just take off, just leave. I don't want to cause any problems. These guys, a lot of times if they let people in, they could get in trouble. They could lose their job and their livelihood. So I completely understand that, and I'm not going to go around that.
So you don't come back later that night with like wire cutters?
No,
night
never
vision
done.
goggles or anything like that.
Well, one time in another place. It wasn't in Bangkok. I won't say where it was. It was elsewhere. I went and I was with my wife, and we asked permission, and the guy was just a total dick. He was a jerk, just super rude.
Oh yeah.
And just not, just going out of his way to be an ass, basically. And so I went back the next day by myself and went in and took photos, kind of snuck around. And then when I was leaving, he saw me and he was super pissed, of course. I just waved and smiled and just kept taking pictures and just walked out and left. But that's the only time that I've kind of broken my own rules in a special case. But yeah, usually, like I said, outside of Bangkok, outside of the city center, it's much easier to get access and to get into places. So, I'll go and just kind of try to find, when I go into a place, try to find the places, the points, the key points of interest that tell the story the best. There's always, at least one or two interesting, high points, whether it's the clock I was talking about, the fountain on the floor, or a giant doorway, or columns, or a huge staircase with really brilliant lighting or something like that. I'll focus on that for a while, and then move around and try to get I'm pretty bad about missing details. Sometimes the little things, and I'm just overwhelmed. Sometimes you go into an amazing place and you're overwhelmed by the size of it and by just the creepy mood, I guess.
Right.
And you don't pay attention to the little things. And often the little things can tell the story better. You see a pair of shoes that somebody's left, or a newspaper that has the date on it, or some magazine that's been cut out. I went to the Paris Theater over, where was that? Dusit area, several years ago. And it was a pretty upscale, like a beautiful mid-century architecture building that a lot of families used to go to and watch films for many years. And it eventually closed down, like a lot of cinemas have, due to, the big chains rising up. But yeah, I went in there in the projection room. There was a picture, like this giant poster of George Michael, 80s George Michael, with like the hairstyle and like
at his peak.
At his peak, like just stuck on the wall in the projection room, and a few other pictures like that, and just kind of takes you back to realize when it was last in operation.
Right.
It was a long time ago.
When long feather earrings on men were cool.
Yeah, and you see that, VHS tapes and things like laying around that I've seen at different places. And
right.
It kind of gives you an idea of the date when it was in its peak form, I guess.
That's one thing that I like about how you present your photos on your website, is that we were talking about it before we started recording, but you write a little piece before each set that explains what the place is and why it's special and why it's unique and how it connects to the neighborhood, which I think is a really interesting bit of added information. Like there's so many people out there who take really cool Instagram photos and just have photo blogs, but you put the extra work in to really sort of explain why this place is important or unique, or why it was important or unique.
Yeah, it's always, the pictures themselves are nice to look at, when people go and document places like this. But to tell the whole story, you need some text, you need some words, you need, the background, and you need to find out why this place was even opened in the first place. What was the value to the local people, the local community that lived here? Like I was saying, movie theaters like that. You can imagine, I think the most amazing place I've taken pictures of in Thailand was the Pech Siam Cinema up in Sukhothai. And it was only open for a few years, but it was a small village. And it was open sometime in the mid to late 80s. And you go in and it's like, when you walk in there, it's like somebody they just turned off the lights, closed the doors and left. And that was it in 1989 or something. And then I'm going back in there. And that's the next time somebody's been in there. It's not, people had obviously been in there before, but everything was still there. These huge, giant, expensive projectors, all the seats. But you're, looking at these seats and this huge, theater, single screen cinema, and imagining people watching, Return of the Jedi,
right,
or some of the big, 80s movies there with their families and some popcorn and enjoying themselves. And this place was probably a cultural focal point of this little farming community at some time. And now it's just a building.
One of the previous podcast guests we've had on, my friend Phil Jablon, who wrote that book.
Phil, I know Phil. He's actually told me quite a few places to go.
Right. He wrote that book on abandoned Thais, old Thai.
He's got a great book.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, he was on in season 3, I think. 3 or 4. I can't remember. He was on though.
Yeah.
That's definitely for sure. So let's talk about. Some of the standouts in Bangkok that a lot of people know are like there's that shopping mall down near Khao San Road that was famous for having the fish.
The New World Mall.
Yeah, New World Mall. Now it's like they're having an art exhibit there recently.
I heard about that.
Yeah, and of course you have the granddaddy of them all, the Ghost Tower,
of course,
the Saturn Unique Tower, which looks over the river, which is this insane bit of architecture. I remember my very first day in Bangkok, I took a boat ride, and I was looking up at this thing like, my God, what an insane city this is. You've been up there, right?
Yeah, I put it off for a while because it's kind of a Bangkok cliche, right? Like everybody talks about it, everybody knows where it is.
Did you wear your fisherman pants when you went?
Yeah, exactly. Elephant pants at that time.
Elephant pants, sorry.
Chang tank top, all that. But
totally.
I went. I decided you can't do what I'm doing and document all the important abandoned places in Thailand without going to the granddaddy of them all, Saturn Unique. So on my birthday one year, I went with my wife, and we got in and got permission from the guard. And I went in for about an hour and a half, and it was special. It's obviously one of the coolest abandoned buildings in Asia or Southeast Asia, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, like I said, I did put it off for a while because I think there are more interesting places, and everybody knows about it. It's been done, but at the same time, I hadn't been in,
right.
So I don't really have any interest in going back. But it was cool to see. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people arrive in the city and as tourists or as travelers, and they see this and they've got to wonder what the story is. And I mean, right in prime real estate, right downtown.
It's such a bizarre thing. I really wonder what's going to happen to it. Like it's almost impossible to knock down.
Yeah, at this point, how do you demolish something that has so much around it, temples and houses?
Yeah.
And
you just got to get like 100 Burmese dudes with sledgehammers and send them to the top and say you get 1,000 baht for every floor you demolish or whatever it is. What other places are standouts for you in Bangkok?
I guess, as I said, the Pech Siam Cinema was pretty cool. Another tower was called the ICE Tower, which was interesting. I don't think it's as interesting as Saturn Unique. The shopping mall, that was cool. I went in there several years ago, and the most amazing thing about this, for me, about the New World Mall was it's. I guess you could say the same for a lot of other abandoned places in the city. But you go into this place, it's such a busy area over there, right? The Dusit area. And you go outside and there's tons of people around. There's tons of action going on, lots of traffic, lots of noise. But you go inside of this place and it's just super quiet. And you're all by yourself and you're all alone in this, city of 10 million people kind of thing,
right.
Feeling. And it's just, it's kind of magical in that way. That's one of the things that draws me to this genre in general, I guess. But that place was special as well. The New World Mall, at least when I went, I was all by myself, just walking up the escalators and going down to the water and checking out the 2 or 3 koi that were in there at that time. This was a few years after they had like 3,000 that had grown to a population of 3,000 fish or something, and that's kind of got really popular. This was years after that, but that was definitely a special place to explore and to check out. And then there's another tower over in Bang Na that's now, as I was mentioning to you earlier before we started this, that it started building it in late 90s, and the crash happened, and construction stopped, and it was abandoned for like 20, 25 years. You see it on the way to the airport on the left-hand side. I remember going by that so many times, just wondering what's going on there, because it was just a skeleton of a building. So I went there once with my wife, and we got permission from kind of the caretakers to go in for about an hour or so. And that place, it's been finished. It's now a Chinese office building of some kind.
Okay.
But it had quite a few kind of dark things happen. There was a couple of suicides, I think. There was they found a dead body up in the elevator shaft. Somebody had been beaten to death or something, and a few other similar incidents. And I guess there were a lot of drug users and stuff that would go and chill there, like tweakers. So that I guess that explains why the family of caretakers was there, full time. To just look after the place. A lot of times places like this, they get, they'll have not so much a security guard, but they'll have like families or groups of people that just kind of live there, and they get, a free place to stay, electricity and water and, a bit of money each month to just look after the place and make sure nobody comes in and graffiti stuff or breaks things.
Starts doing satanic rituals or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, I think that kind of, sometimes you see like black magic stuff,
Oh, do you really?
Yeah. Like some of the, kind of I guess it's not like a cult thing, but like kind of Thai black magic animism, those guys, the guys that have like tons of rings and necklaces and like bandanas and stuff. I've seen some.
I'm not sure if those guys are cowboys or high priests.
Yeah, they kind of have a cowboy look going, right? Like bell bottoms and stuff sometimes. But there was one in I was in Chiang Mai in the old prison, the women's prison. It started off as a men's prison, and then it became a women's prison around the 1970s. And that place had an altar, which was really weird. It had like a horned figure spray painted on there and all these symbols and stuff. And that place was pretty dark, apparently. I mean, It's not in Bangkok, but it's still kind of notable because whenever it closed, the city of Chiang Mai paid for 7 days and 7 nights of Buddhist monk rituals to be performed there because there was so much, bad mojo.
Just cleanse that place completely.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it used to be a place where they did executions for a while. Plus there were some murders, and they found a dead body in the well there and all this stuff. And it's a pretty creepy place all in all. But yeah, I saw an altar there. I've seen signs of stuff like that at different places, but that was the only one I've seen that's like a full-on altar of some kind, which was a bit odd. But
does your wife is Thai? Does she ever get freaked out coming in with you?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, that's why she doesn't come so much anymore. There's been times we were in Kanchanaburi at this old abandoned shopping mall / water park, the Castle Mall, I think it's called. And we were in there, we thought we were all by ourselves, and it's a huge place. And we kept hearing all these.
Sorry. Is this the one that's just sort of like on the left of the road, looking over the river? I think I can't remember.
I don't think there's any water nearby. It's on like the main thoroughfare through Kanchanaburi, like outside, not kind of a bit outside the town.
I think I've been there.
It looks like a castle.
Yes,
the facade does.
I was in there about 12 years ago, and there was about 2 stores open and a couple of little stalls, and I was
the
like,
tail end. They had like a I don't know, a bonchon or a shabushi or something.
Yeah,
like
and I'm like, how is this place even existing? I'm sorry, I interrupted your story.
No, that's exactly right. Though they had, it just these places kind of sometimes just stay open by a thread. They have a couple left.
It's almost
over.
like out of like stubbornness. Like,
the
hell with it. We're staying open if it
somebody's
costs us
paying
money.
rent.
Yeah. So what happened?
But yeah, we started hearing all this like breaking glass and crashing of stuff and just all this commotion in a far off area in the mall. And my wife, just by I guess reaction, just reaches down and picks up like a broken stick, like she's going to use it to kind of defend herself. And I was like, okay, don't freak out. I'm sure there's a rational explanation. Come to find out, it's a really popular place for BB gun wars, like for BB gun teams to go and do their airsoft like matches.
So you got a bunch of 14-year-old kids shooting pizza glasses.
They were
crazed woman with a stick comes around the corner.
They were grown men. Okay. But yeah, it was pretty weird because all these guys, they come out and they're decked out like in this full, military, outfits and gear and stuff, and these, super high tech airsoft automatic guns.
Right.
And they were just running around chasing each other and doing their thing.
Right.
We kind of stepped out of it and just let them finish their match, and then went in and finished. But yeah, it's been. For the most part, it's places aren't that dangerous. You should, if you're doing what I do, you should take somebody with you. You shouldn't go alone. But I think, and I don't want to be naive, and I think in Bangkok compared to, say, places that I've been in the US or South Africa or maybe Ukraine, it's not as dangerous. A lot of times people that are there, especially if they're squatters, they're living there, they just don't want to be bothered. They don't want to bother you. They don't want to rob you. If you leave something laying around, they might take it. But I don't think there's as much danger as there would be in other places. But at the same time, it can be sketchy. I mean, this isn't a shopping mall or a nightclub or something that has a lot of people, and it's running on its peak moment in existence. But yeah, I mean, the only time I've really had anything shady happen where somebody kind of threatened me was at a strip mall, or it was a market in, I think, Samut Prakan. And I was there, I'll back up a little bit. I get information about locations from a few different sources. One of my sources is my friend Matt, who's a local journalist. He runs Disrupt, and he works with Getty and does quite a few independent things. And he tells me about these locations that are, I guess there's like a kind of a subculture in Thailand of men who kind of meet up at abandoned places for romance, let's say, like a cruising spot kind of thing.
Right. And
there's like they have their own kind of Twitter page where they broadcast these places to go and meet up, and they actually make some pretty interesting abandoned places to go take pictures of. So
interesting.
Matt's told me about some of these places, and this was one of them, which is just so random for it to be like a hookup spot. I guess I think that kind of thing typically happens in the evening, so I typically go in the morning or the midday. And I was there at this market, and the market's, it's set up where it has these long corridors of stalls on either side. And in the center, there's a long, dark hallway. And I walked into that hallway, and there was just a bunch of junk. You couldn't see anything. You could see the very end of it, which is a long way, 100 meters down. And there was, an opening where there was a doorway, and I wanted to take pictures toward that opening doorway to get like a vanishing point perspective or something. And
sure.
So I was taking pictures, and suddenly this dark figure just pops up off the floor out of nowhere, like maybe 50 meters down. This dude was just sleeping there, I guess.
Oh God.
Just chilling. Like that's his sleeping spot. And he popped out. I couldn't really see who he was. He had crazy hair and didn't have a shirt on. And he starts throwing stuff at me, right? Throwing rocks at me. And like, I don't want to damage my camera. And one of them like bounced off the floor and hit me in the leg. So I just kind of walked out and left. But I'm not leaving the place. I had permission to be there. I talked to the security guard and paid him a couple $100 baht, and he, gave me a bit of a tour and then left me to stay as long as you like, kind of thing. So I had permission to be there. This guy obviously doesn't own the place, I don't think. So
right.
I walk around, take pictures. I get to the area where I think he kind of calls home, where he's got his stuff and where he crashes. I didn't go into that area, but I was nearby because there was some interesting things to take pictures of. And he comes over and he's like telling me to go and telling me to get out of here and all this. And I didn't say anything. I just stopped and just looked right at him and just paused and just stared at him like, I'm not afraid of you, bro. Like you don't own this place. You can't tell me to leave. And he just kind of backed down and didn't bother me again. But that was the only time really that
it's a bit unnerving though.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. If you're in a dark hallway, you can't see what's going on. You don't know if the guy's got a knife or something. He's going to try to stab you, and he's obviously not with all of his facilities.
Yeah.
So he could do something kind of weird or crazy. But out in the bright lights, it's not. He's not as brave, I think. So
right. The ghosts and monsters generally.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of these places, of course, have they're associated with bad mojo and ghosts and negative energy in general, and bad things have happened there, and they're haunted, and so Thais can be very just worried about or scared about going into these kind of places, which I understand that. But for the most part, the scariest thing is other people. There's no
yes, exactly.
Believe in the ghosts, or your main threat is going to be some other person.
Yeah.
But that's the only time that I can remember in Thailand that I've really had any scary moments. I guess a bit scary, but ended up not being that bad.
Yeah, I guess you also got to worry about the roof collapsing in on you or something like that.
Yeah, that too. The whole structural integrity thing is a bit of a concern sometimes. You hear the creaking, and and some of the stairs are not so solid, and the footing's not so good sometimes as well.
Right. Have you been down to like the Makasan rail yard, the old Makasan?
I'd like to go in there. Yeah, that's at the top of my list. You can apparently apply. You can ask for permission from the local municipality to get in there, and I've done that. I had my wife send an email, and we asked politely, and I never got any replies. I have quite a few friends that have been in there. They just kind of sneak in illegally, but they have guards, and I know some people that have been caught, and they said basically you get one free pass this time. If you come back again, we're pressing charges, and you can it goes from there, what the bad things that can happen. Right. So I'd love to go for obvious reasons. It's a really beautiful place. You can see it from the tollway. You can look down and see all the old cars and all the old, maybe the engines as well. But no, I haven't been in there. I've been in, there's one over in Bang Sue that I've been to, kind of more open. Uh-huh. And it's a smaller version of the Makasan one. And,
okay.
There's also out in Samut Sakon in Mahachai. I went to some abandoned train cars. There's maybe 5 or 6 of them there, which are really cool. It was near where I used to work. So I'd go out there on my bike or drive my car by and just stop and take pictures sometimes. But yeah, Makasan, I'd love to. But it's, it's one of those things I've got to get permission, and I've got to, do it the right way. If I can do that, I'll definitely do it.
That's one thing, over 20 years in Bangkok, back in the early days, especially sort of finding shortcuts around the right way to do things that taught me it's always better to just do things the right way. And do things with permission. And
less stress, and you just don't want to ruffle the wrong feathers and whatnot. But
Bangkok's not a place where feather ruffling is a good idea.
No, typically not.
So as we're wrapping up now, like, what's your takeaway for the I don't know what to call it. I guess the thoughts around abandoned places in Bangkok? Like, there's so many cool structures here sitting on prime land that is just waiting to be developed. Like, I always tell people that I really love Bangkok. That's why the podcast exists. It's an interesting city, but it's not a very pretty city overall.
Comparatively, yeah.
Yeah.
Singapore or something.
But, you look at the river, and the river is bizarrely underdeveloped for a city this big. And there's just so many structures that are just sitting there and no one's thinking about. Have you noticed sort of any new thinking about this? Like, we should what they did with Long 1919, even though that's going to be knocked down now. There's real value in these places. There's historical value. There's cultural value. Has there been a shift in thinking, do you think?
I don't really think so. I mean, I think it all comes down to money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Nobody's afraid of gentrification in this city. If there's money to be made, who cares about history for the most part, unfortunately.
Yes, I agree.
Knock down paradise and put up a parking lot kind of thing. And that's what's, happening all over the place. So just to finish some of these buildings, these giant, skeletal remains of, leftover Tom Yum Goong crisis, buildings, to finish those takes a lot of capital, takes a lot of money, to do that, and even to demolish them and then to build something new. So, and they do get finished from time to time. Like I was saying, the Chinese office building in Bang Na and a few others, they'll finish the project decades later, which is great. But as far as the ones that are still there, that have been there for upwards of 30 years now. I don't know what the future holds. I mean, like I said, I think it just comes down to if somebody has the money to do something with it, if they want to do something with it, then they will.
Yeah.
But as far as preserving history, I think the one place that they are preserving is the old customs house down on the river,
right? Which
is great because that was there in like the 1870s or 1880s, and it has a lot of stories to tell. I think that's becoming like a boutique hotel, which is great as long as they they keep it, keep the bones. But that's maybe unfortunately kind of the exception to the rule. I think a lot of times they just tear stuff down.
I tend to agree, but I'm a little bit more optimistic, and I use the case of the Yodpiman market versus Talat Noi. And the Yodpiman market is the old Pak Klong Talat, the flower market, the vegetable market.
Yeah.
And, it's a beautiful old historical little community with old warehouses and buildings and things. And what they did was they basically gutted this building and built it new to look old. And it's, they put in a Chester's Grill and a Starbucks and a 7-Eleven, and they robbed it of all of its personality. And it's abandoned. It's dead. No one goes, even beyond COVID, no one goes there because there's nothing there that you can't see in a million other spots in Bangkok.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But then you go to Talat Noi. And when I lived in Talat Noi 12 years ago, it was a really sort of out of the way, funky, forgotten corner of Bangkok. Now it's become really hip and cool.
Yeah.
And you can see the community is starting to take back this, like they're starting to value the history and the architecture and the attitude and the mojo of the place, as you would say.
You're right. Yeah. Talat Noi is awesome.
It gives me hope because there's some really cool stuff down there, and they haven't knocked anything down. They're just using the stuff that's still there.
The orange car, it's still
yes, right. The most photographed thing in Bangkok.
There's a guy there selling, hand-drawn. I bought a hand-drawn postcard. This guy was selling.
I bought a bunch of them. I sent it out to our $5 patrons. They get a postcard on their birthday.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
So, so there is hope, but I think those things are unfortunately sort of few and far between.
Yeah. I I do like that example though. That's gives us all a bit of hope that not everything's going to go the direction of gentrification, but and hopefully Thailand always stays the way it is as long as it possibly can.
Yeah, it's a great.
Love taking pictures there, just going through, and it's got a cool vibe to it.
Yeah, you take 1,000,000 pictures down there, and then you go down there again, and you're like, oh, let's just take a few more.
Yeah, you see something totally different, right? And a different day, different lights, a different little mechanic shop that's opened up or something.
Right.
Tons of metal stacked up along the walls.
Yeah. Well, anyway, man, thanks for coming on and chatting. It's really interesting, and your photos are really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
And I like the background you also provide too. So where can people find you online and check your stuff out?
I have an Instagram and a Facebook page and my website. And I guess my website would be the place to start. Just daxward.com. And I've got links to all my social media, and all of my galleries are there, all the places I've documented, from the Chernobyl exclusion zone to Thailand to the US and South Africa, and hopefully Japan in the near future if COVID allows.
Cool. That's next for you, right? Japan?
Yeah, it's next on the list. I'd love to go back to Ukraine, but things have kind of happened lately that might prevent that. So yeah, I think Japan will be the next. I've got quite a few places to go there.
All right. Well, cool. Thanks, man. It's a pleasure meeting you, and thanks for coming on and chatting.
Thanks a lot,
and,
Greg.
I'm going to keep checking back on your website because there's some awesome stuff. Looking forward to a Japanese angle.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
I appreciate it, Greg. Thanks a lot. This has been fun.
Cool. Take care, man.
Thanks.
Dude, I'm surprised you didn't mention his name. Just the name Dax Ward. He sounds like the hero of like a video game or something.
Oh, I didn't mention, when we were done the interview, he just jumped out of the window and pulled a parachute and floated down to the BTS. No, that you're right. I didn't pick up on that, but that is a cool name. It's like whoosh, whip pan on the camera, Dax Ward. He pulls out his gun or something.
Well, he does sound like an adventurer.
Yeah, these places that he goes into, they're not easy to find. They're not easy to get to, and they're dangerous, man. There's like, maybe this is my dad vision coming out, but there's like rusty metal and sharp nails on the floor and broken
sure
stuff. So it's not easy.
More power to anyone who can make a career out of making art. You win. In particular, photography. I appreciate, because I take a lot of casual photographs, and I do fantasize about like, wow, wouldn't it be great to be a professional photographer? But I know how hard it is to just find your own niche, and especially with mobile phones today, just anyone has really a fairly high quality camera in their hand, and there used to be a big difference between snapshots and professional photos, but that gap has been narrowing.
Yeah, significantly, I would say. But, I think you could probably take some really nice photos in one of these places with an iPhone. Maybe not as nice as the stuff that Dax does, but still, you've got to get to that place, which is, fully half of the work.
Right. So it's just fantastic that he's just found this unique thing and made something out of it. So it's just great, man. I love people like him that just, because I'm part of the photography subculture. I go to a lot of websites. I'm on a lot of bulletin boards, and a lot of people just say like, well, it's just too hard to make money. It's too hard to make a living with a camera. Like, it's just a hobby.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I really enjoy it, but I'm just too scared of trying to make a career out of, I shoot a lot of video too, so I consider myself like a photo and video hobbyist, but just the thought of making a career out of it and trying to find a way to make money, it's just too intimidating.
You might as well be talking about podcasting too.
Yeah, right. It's like, I can't do it. So anytime I meet people who manage to find a way to do it, more power to them.
Yeah, so check out daxward.com, and many thanks for Dax coming on the show. He's got some great stuff up there, and I follow him on Instagram, and he posts some nice stuff there too. So yeah, thanks again, man, and everyone check out his website.
Thanks, Dax.
All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with, no matter how we feel about it. And last time I asked Ed what he thought of those brooms that people use to sweep up puddles on the street. So this week, Ed, what do you got for me?
All right, I got something very general that certainly does apply in other countries, including back in the States, but I just feel like it's just much more common here. And I just want to ask you your general take on food courts, especially in particular the ones where you have to prepay for like a food card or whatever you want to call it. You know, you have to go to the special booth and pay your money and get the card. And then you're going, I feel, am I wrong? Are these way more common here than back home? I've done it before, but here I feel that they're way more common.
You mean the one like the paying with a card or getting the
That's
card?
right. Well, it's like the idea, so let's say you're in a mall and instead of just having a bunch of separate restaurants, it's a food court, but they don't take cash, and you've got to prepay and get the card ahead of time. Now, I've got my take on them, and I'm just curious. Like, do you like it? Not like it? You just don't think about it? You just do it? What's your take?
Yeah, I don't think about it. I think it's a fine system. When you know the prices and you know what you're going to buy, it's fine. But what I don't like is when you're caught off guard. Like if you say, "Oh, I'm just going to get like 100 baht should be enough," and then you find out that like each dish is like 60 baht, and you get 3 dishes, and then you're like, "Oh," and then you got to run back and get extra money on your card, and then run back to the booth where you bought your food. That's the only time it's inconvenient for me. So I think it's a pretty good system usually.
All right. I can't really say I'm quite a loathe, but I got to say, I just don't like how common they are because I'm just the doofus who just doesn't realize I have to do that. And I walk up and try to buy something and they're like, dude, you got to go get the card. That happens to me a lot where I'm just looking at the restaurants. I'm like, oh, those noodles look really good. And I just walk up and then they're like, oh, you got to go over there, and then there's the awkward language thing where I don't understand why they're pointing. Like, why are you pointing over there?
Right.
And then I realize, oh shit, this is a food court. I didn't realize this is a food court. Right. And then I've also had the problem that you've had where I don't have enough money on the card. But then probably my biggest pet peeve is forgetting to turn the card back in and getting the refund. So it's like, just in random drawers in my apartment, I've got a bunch of like old like food cards, like I've got these cards. Like, who knows how much money is on them? Just like I find them in my wallet or I find them in my bag, and I'm like, oh shit, that was from the food court at Plunchit.
Yeah, you've donated like, thousands of baht to these food courts over the years.
So I can't say I hate them. I understand the point, but every time I find myself in one, I'm just like, why can't they just take money? Money is money. Like, what's the?
So I mean, from a management point of view, it's just it eliminates the level of trust that you have to give to this workforce that's probably got a fairly high turnover rate. So you don't have to trust.
But why is it better for the customer? I'm a customer, Greg.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's considered in the math. It's
all right, so I can't say I hate it. I get it. So this might be like a barely live with for me.
I'm a full-on live with. It doesn't bother me, and you just got to know, like you got to know that if you're going to like the food court at the police headquarters, they're down across from Central World. It's really good. It's hidden behind all the other buildings, and they've got the best yum pladuk phu shredded catfish that I've ever had in Thailand. And you know that the dishes there are going to be like 20, 25 baht. But then you go to like Paragon across the street and a dish is 85 baht. So you got to prepare yourself. That's the only speed bump. But
for sure.
I'm a solid live with on these. They don't bother me.
Okay. I'm a near loathe. A near loathe.
Okay,
we need more categories. We need like, instead of love, loathe, or live with, I want like 7 tiers. Right. We need like more L. No, we need more L words. We need more L words.
You want like the Dungeons and Dragons alignment chart. Like I'm a chaotic love on this one.
So funny. All right. A final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Yeah, you can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can send us a voicemail through our website that we'll feature on the show, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter, where I am BKKGreg. So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you back here next week.
See you next week. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, LA.
Got in just under the line. April 1st, Canada and Thailand remove the testing requirements for inbound
Bastard.
passengers.
I told you I don't really agree with that. Or I think they should have got rid of the arrival tests in Thailand.
Yeah, I think testing at this like where you're leaving from is probably the more prudent one.
Yeah, because you're getting on a plane with a bunch of strangers. It would be nice to know that they've been tested, you know?
Yeah, I saw someone online say like, oh, it's just a big scam. So that when people get here, they need to go into quarantine in the hotels because keep making money.
Right. That sounds about right.
Which I've heard stranger things.